the camera back. We'll get there. We're doing it.
Oh,
Okay, I'm excited now.
well, it looks like the,
It's an hourglass. That's
yeah, it looks like the subtitles are at least working. All right, welcome to the June 20th work session for the Webster Groves City Council. I'm happy to have you with us, whether you're online or you're here. We actually do have a few online. What do you know? We're going to start today with board and commission interviews, which we have none. So look at us moving along here. Does anyone have anything on the regular agenda that they'd like to remove, discuss? I'm just going to ask for the sake of agenda management. Does anyone have already in mind any budget amendments, or have we dispensed with all those at this point? Okay, looks like we've dispensed with them, so that'll be a little more efficient. When we do consider the budget, I do invite you, if you have any general comments on the budget or the work that was done to put it together, to please go ahead and do that. We will now have city manager, mayor, council members, others, announcements. Emily, there you are.
sure. Here I am. We had the meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission to talk about priorities and projects for the kind of like the upcoming year. There's a list of several that they're considering, but really the top priority right now is getting fully staffed. So if anybody knows of people that might be interested in being on the Historic Preservation Commission, that would be great. We have 3 open seats. So that's kind of the top priority for that commission right now. I mean, they're working on other things too, but that would be great if people could help recruit for that. And then the Green Space Advisory Commission met as well. 2 things from that. One, the details for the service for Linda Green came out. They were also in the Webster Kirkwood Times. It will be 11 to 2 this Saturday, the 24th at Lorraine Davis Park. And then the other one is we do have more information about the Leave the Leaves program, which I'm happy to talk about maybe later in the agenda if we have time.
I missed the park. Where is?
Lorraine Davis.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and then, sorry, one more thing for green space that we don't have to circle back when I remember later.
That's okay.
This Thursday, and I probably said July 24th, this Thursday, June 22nd, we have the like conservation planning talk at Webster. So that evening, it's 6:30 for meet and greet, 7 o'clock for a talk at Webster University. And then in the morning, electeds and city staff have been invited to like a walk around and a roundtable discussion with the speaker at 9 o'clock at Maypop. So if people are able to make that, that would be great.
And how long do we expect that one to last?
I would think maybe 2 hours.
Okay.
Half an hour chatting, kind of getting to know who's there and looking at some large scale things, and then an hour and a half.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I think that's it.
All right, David, thank you very much, Emily.
I was just going to comment that our proposal that we adopted last meeting regarding getting things on the agenda in regards to the boards and commissions, I think it's working pretty effectively. I think this might be the first one, the Traffic Advisory Commission. So we'll see if we have to work out any kinks, but they understand the process now that something has been declined or been not granted approval or endorsed by the city manager. And so we'll see how it goes, but I think they understand it and they feel like there's pretty much clarity in the next steps.
Good, thank you.
Let's see. Last week I attended the Charter Review Advisory Board meeting. During that meeting, they reviewed the survey results that had just closed that day. There were over 300 respondents, and each of the questions basically measured certain topics and whether the community thought those were worthy of charter review or worthy of a vote, et cetera, et cetera. And so they have not made any decisions. They are going to be doing a series of community engagement events. And the first one is coming up Thursday, the 29th for board and commission members. They've been about 200 have been invited. And I think about 20 have RSVP'd that they will be attending. Last week also, I attended the Juneteenth celebration at Ivory Park, and it was fun to connect with residents. And there were snow cones and cookies and music that also were great as well. And then I am planning on attending the conservation planning lecture on Thursday night. That is, the Green Space Commission has looked at that before, and so it's good to have an update on that. Then I will be attending the roundtable as well. And then just a brief kudos to staff, basically Public Works, who spearheaded the grant, the application for the grant for the Department of Transportation EV charging that will be matched by the city. And I know lots of departments contributed. And so essentially the main idea is to have some locations, public locations throughout the city that could be used for charging. And that's it.
Great, thank you.
No updates, Mayor.
I have nothing.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll add on to what Councilwoman Bliss shared. So the EV infrastructure charging grants, and we submitted a proposal for about 2.5 million, which there is some city match, but really grateful and appreciative of city staff, Public Works, Finance, IT for some of our GIS mapping. But the goal is to have several ADA accessible charging stations placed across the city. And so really excited about that. My only other update is that we have a city chats tomorrow at 11 a.m. Lynn O'Brien, who is working with the city temporarily through a National League of Cities grant funds, will be sharing about our upcoming webinar series. It's a 3-part series on women's empowerment. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please join us tomorrow at 11 and meet Lynn.
Great, Katie?
No.
All right, looks like I left my notebook in my office, so let's see if I can remember this. I think everything has been covered. The one thing I will add, I did take part in the mayor's group, the municipal mayors of St. Louis, about 10 days ago. The head of East West Gateway was in to talk about the crime summit that was held in May of this year. It looks like it was an invitation only event, and to keep it small for good discussion. It sounds like they were very pleased with the discussion that they had and with the recognition that neither social services nor policing alone is going to solve this problem, that both have to cooperate with the other. They are engaged in discussions with a center at the University of Maryland that does violence prevention and intervention, as well as studying. And Mayor Jones has suggested that she expects that they'll engage with this organization to do some study and some real interventions in the city within the next year or so. So we'll see how that goes. But the fundamental point that he wanted us to come away with was there is an ongoing discussion now that hasn't been happening before between all the entities involved, and that should be a good start to getting us somewhere. And I think that's my only update, because Pam did a great job on Charter Review Advisory Board. The library board meets tomorrow, but we'll have the budget presentation tonight. So we'll get to that. I am going to say we go ahead and start with our topics and turn this over to Dr. Peoples for her update. You'll excuse me for a second while I grab something from my office. Please don't be offended that I'll be gone for 30 seconds.
I'm gonna step down here, just it's a little easier with the slides.
All right, Jenny, we rocking and rolling. This is really just going to be a quick update as council dives into discussing the broader DEI efforts. And so I thought I would share some of the process that Carter Hicks went through when they did our DEI work last February. After sharing the recap from Carter Hicks, I'm going to share some of the organizational overview of what we've implemented. It certainly is not an exhaustive list. It's really just representative of some of the changes that we're making so that we can build upon them and create some sustainable systems and culture changes. So Carter Hicks, they did 3 types of data collection: employee interviews, focus groups, community focus groups, and the community survey. And what you'll see on these next slides, and I'm not going to go through each of these, what I did is this is what Hicks-Carter-Hicks findings were. You can also find her PowerPoint on the city website. I did not change any of the words. I just plugged them into this if people wanted a refresher and to be able to find it in one place. But you can see from the employee interview themes that it really varies. There were city employees that felt like city departments were siloed. They felt like there might be departments that have differing levels of resistance, but then there were others that said, you know, city's priorities and values are not clear to all employees, but they feel like DEI is important. So there was a mixed bag on that. But one of the takeaways that I had was that we should have a focus on inclusion, not just diversity. And then the focus group themes from city employees were that they felt that cities' recruiting and hiring practices are critical for promoting DEI. And you'll see in some of our initiatives that we've done that we've really focused on that. Employees also felt that the community cares about DEI and that diversity of city employees is becoming a strength for the city, that we need to promote more and highlight what we're doing for DEI. Then there's also the alternative view that DEI process is just for show. Thank you.
Too much or no?
You're fine. So then the community focus group themes really, for the most part, reflected the findings from employees as well. The community thought that City Council has done a great job highlighting the importance of DEI. They thought that the city manager provided a different direction, but the community also felt that there was a lack of clear messaging as to the DEI priorities and actions, which I believe is some of what you all are going to discuss this evening. Community members also shared that they thought our hiring practices failed to promote DEI, and they also felt that it was important to recognize the history of Webster Groves. Qualitative themes from the survey, and there were quite a bit of survey respondents to this. Interesting, as we go through the charter review process, there was a comment on changing to award system could be an opportunity. There was also comments that our efforts within the parks have had a renewed focus on DEI. People appreciated that we were soliciting feedback from the community to hear various perspectives. And then pool access was an area of concern regarding DEI. You can go ahead. So all of that data, which again, people can find the in-depth presentations and survey results online if they're interested in doing a deep dive, but all of that culminated into these recommendations: to develop a DEI strategy and plan to leverage strengths and address barriers, to create the DEI vision, mission, purpose, and importance of DEI, develop communications to employees and community, establish a DEI council, which would consist of city employees and community members, and that we needed to foster inclusivity and equity in recruitment, hiring, and retention practices, and that we should hold regular listening and discussion sessions internally and externally to focus on the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right, so what have we been doing? We've been doing quite a bit. Couldn't be more proud of each of the departments and staff. So started with human resources and administration. And again, I won't read all of this to you, but I think we've done some real key things. We've de-identified applications by removing names before applications are sent to hiring managers. That was a pretty big step. We've also implemented some monthly webinar trainings for staff. Previously, there was some trainings, but it wasn't done collectively and perhaps in a annual manner. So we've completed sexual harassment training already, and we had 100% compliance. So we were pretty proud of that. Upcoming trainings are on discrimination and DEI. We've created a service awards program so that we can recognize our employees that have hit significant milestones with the city. And that's as Mr. Buck would say, a win-win, because for those milestones, they're getting Webster bucks. So they're able to also spend within the community. So that's been great. Investing in more employee events, chili cook-offs, employee appreciation day. And then, of course, we went through the rigorous process of the compensation and classification study. And if people are interested in learning more about that, those materials are also all on the website. But a big step that we did there was that we adjusted the staff that were identified as being underpaid, and we brought them within range. Now, most of those were our skilled trades. We certainly haven't solved all of the problem. We still have some equity adjustments to look at, both with race and gender. So that will be ongoing work. There are some that have already been identified just in terms of compression, not necessarily equity, that we'll be able to also address within FY24. New policies, really excited about this one. We've developed 3 new policies that benefit employees, alternate work schedules. So 410s is the most classic example of that, but allowing people to work a little differently. Teleworking, we, as you all know, have really spent time on modernizing. We didn't have the capability for people to be able to telework. We're a lot closer there. So we've developed policies there for those employees that it would suit their job to be able to do that. And then complying with the law, we also developed a policy around adult use marijuana.
So before you
Yes,
go on,
ma'am.
just out of curiosity, have we had employees who are looking into the alternate work schedules and the telework? I know the policies are brand new, so it'll take a little while for people to get acquainted with them.
I'm not sure people believe it yet.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so
All right, for all the employees of the city of Webster Groves, we really mean
Absolutely.
it.
So people are having discussions with supervisors and then they submit that application process through HR and work it out with their supervisors. They don't
Okay.
necessarily even come to me and they
Okay.
don't need to. It's in between the department directors and their staff.
But I assume that we're collecting some data as we
Yes.
go along with this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're also for 6-month pilot periods. And of
Okay.
course, if it's not working before, then there's language that it could end. But we want to make sure that it benefits the employee as well as getting the organizational needs as well. So we're hopeful and to share some piloting information soon.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd, you look like you had a question.
No, I was just, we're talking about the alternate work schedule.
So public safety, of course, has implemented lots of initiatives. Internship ride-along program has been highlighted by the fire department. So that is definitely exciting. May not seem like a big deal on the police departments, but the allowance of facial hair was a big deal. So that was a kudos to Chief Curtis on that one. And then we've also revamped, with the help of Miss Jenny Starkey here, our recruitment brochures. And so I don't believe council has seen those and they're not quite on the street yet. We're still working out some of the finer details, but just having our materials that really represent the quality of the departments and the services that we're providing has been really neat. So we've got brochures. Jenny's also been working on some recruitment videos with both of those departments. And then we're playing around perhaps with some hiring stipends for those hard to fill positions. So not quite ready to roll those out, but it's certainly in the works. And I won't read this, but I was really proud of this one. So the police department established a new policy that's applicable to arrest of gender and non-conforming transitioning or transitioned persons, which to me really spoke to the level of inclusivity that the police department is trying to have. So I'll give you all a moment just to look at that. But I think that's something that we can be proud of as an organization. Go ahead, Jen. Public affairs. So there's been lots of focus, meaningful focus on the website to ensure that our website is more accessible for users of all abilities and backgrounds. We've made a number of changes to images and PDFs so that they're more accessible. We've incorporated a variety of holidays and recognition months in our social media posting and outreach. Certainly renaming of our conference rooms and having some of the biography information available for each of those individuals and representing through representation. And then we're also just trying to break down some of those silos by having more group directors meetings, more boards and commissions engagement, which I think council can verify is occurring. And then, of course, there's some of our celebrations, Juneteenth and our Pride recognition.
Before we move on to that
Yes,
one,
ma'am.
I'm holding us up again.
I'm sorry.
I know that the Gordon and Marsh families had been notified. Did we ever notify the Sheffields? Does anyone know?
We did, so I will turn to Jenny on that.
I did an initial reach out and I hadn't heard back, and then I confess I haven't done a second reach out, so I do need to connect with the Sheffield. family.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Did you go with Ellen or with
Yes.
Jamie? Okay.
And,
If you don't get any response, I'll help you follow up.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
We'll show the Gordon family came and they took pictures and had a reporter and they were proud of it, as they should be.
Yeah.
So that was a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So finance, who thought finance could be exciting? But they are looking at doing quite a bit of work, developing vendor registration processes to record minority and women-owned business designations, developing city training and business support programs for vendors so that they comply with city procurement, utilizing free trainings and support from National League of Cities to gather potential policy and process changes that involve racial equity goals, metrics more deeply in the city financial. And I think this is really important, but in terms of how we invest and who we invest with. Parks and Recreation. So certainly the coordinated effort of the freestyle pool pass, which there's all kinds of partners involved in that, and it's been very rewarding. Council member Smith and Alexander, I believe you both have been involved in pool pass. Am I missing anybody? So that's been incredibly helpful. We've advertised and hired a new inclusion coordinator, to facilitate participation in recreational opportunities for those individuals who may have any special needs. This is a really neat partnership with other municipalities because it's a shared staff person. The person is here at Webster Groves, but we share with Clayton, Maryland Heights, and Richmond Heights. July 4th parade, we've got increased information on ADA accessibility, and we've got an increased number of floats celebrating LGBTQ+. All right. Those are
I'm
some
going
of
to
the
ask you
city
to do
highlights.
one more thing, though.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
mentioned it in your update a little bit,
Ah.
but will you talk a little bit more about the grant from the National League of Cities and how that fits in? Because I don't believe council really has heard about it much, other than maybe we'll get a grant for participating in the boards and commissions recruitment process.
So through participating in that, we had an opportunity to apply for a small grant. It was $15,000. So we did. And the deliverables were pretty wide open in terms of what we can do. $15,000, as you all know, does not go a long way in terms of trying to do a community program. So I'm incredibly proud of how we've stretched those funds. So we're doing a women's empowerment webinar series. It's three separate webinars, 1 hour each, open to anybody. They're free of charge, does not just have to be women, but they focus on how to write a business plan, how to come up with your branding of your plan, and just leadership, motivation. So we're really excited about that. But what that will culminate in is that women who participate in all three and fill out a very short application will have the opportunity to apply for a small micro grant for their business. So it's pretty cool. So I hope that some of you will be able to join it. Now, if people cannot join during those 3 live webinar times, because it's meant to be interactive, ask some questions, they of course will be recorded and available later on the city website.
And because someone out there is asking the question, why are we leaving the men out? It is important to note that this particular grant program is structured in a way to increase representation within our economic development aspects of the city and city government.
It certainly is. Unfortunately, and lots of research shows we do not have as many women and minority owned businesses. We are not unique in that manner. So it certainly is seen as a method to help encourage, engage women, and give some of those essential things. I named the business plan, coming up with a business plan, knowing the resources to connect to get one, how to apply for bank loans, those sorts of things. It's hard. So hopefully we will see some outcomes, and we're not leaving out the fellas because they are encouraged and welcome to attend the webinars.
There you go.
And I'll say it's always been the flip side of that. For so many years, it's always about the men, not necessarily the women.
Yeah.
Wants to become an entrepreneur. So good, glad to see it.
Exciting. If there's no other questions, council, that's my presentation.
All right, no one has questions?
Yes.
Yes, of course,
Yes,
Emerson has
Councilman
questions. Go for it, Emerson.
Well, thank you for the update for the DEI. So I know we have funds set aside in the budget to start that process this next budget year. I believe it's 50,000. Do we know how far that will take us in the DEI process?
So thank you. And the short answer is I don't know. And we do have 50,000 that council set aside for FY23 that is carrying over to FY24. And really in terms of how far it will go, really from my perspective, depends on the conversation tonight and what it is that council wants to do. Once I have some direction on what interests council and how you think you want to end up, then we can start putting together some of the pricing and programming or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, because once you start, it's not good to start and then stop because you run out of funds. 4, 5, 6 months later, you pick it up again. So you've lost the first 4 or 5 months you started. So it'll be good to know how far that will take us, and so we can make any adjustments that need to be made.
So thank you. And that was one of my budget recommendations to council, is that if we're really going to invest in the DEI work, it's not a one-time expenditure. It's something that needs to be invested in every year. Now, what that investment looks like can be different. And 50,000 doesn't necessarily have to be the magic number, but I do believe that there should be that budget line that's dedicated to whatever it does look like.
And my last comment is that we're going to focus on employees internally first or externally?
So there were recommendations from Hicks Carter Hicks for both internal and external that were just kind of rolled up there. And I am looking for the answer to that question from council. Where is the priority? Are we focusing internally first? Which I think that we have focused internally first to a large degree with many of the things that I just shared. But there's much more to be done. You know, that's scratching the surface. So are we focusing internally? Are we focusing externally? If it is external, what does that look like? Who's responsible for the work? Is council engaging? Is there a staff liaison? All those things that you all will talk about in just a few minutes.
Jenny, will you pull back up the recommendation slide, please? Kind of midway through the presentation.
Well, she's doing that, I guess my vote will be internally because the individuals that serve our city, and that's the face they'll see. So if they don't have those skills to have the DEI temperament, I think that's where it should start. Start internally, and then after we get that down, then go to external.
Thank you.
All right, how about if we let you go ahead? You're still going to participate from over there, but at least you don't have to be standing up. So for the rest of our time in work session today, or as much time as we want to spend, that is the whole point of dedicating this much time, is to figure out what comes next. As Dr. Peoples' presentation shows, there's a lot going on internally, and that's part of the recommendation. And so these were the recommendations that were made. And we have a DEI statement. We don't have the mission, the purpose, the vision necessarily. Communications generally have improved in this area, but we don't necessarily have a dedicated line of communication here. So as we look at what those are, the top three, I think in some ways go together. And then, the next one is then the establishment of a DEI council. I think that second to bottom one, foster inclusivity and equity in recruitment, hiring and retention practices. I mean, I understand that's an ongoing process, but in terms of fixing the structure and the rules and the process, from the presentation, I feel like we've come a long way there. So, what else of this do you all as a council think we should be spending our time on over this next, I don't know, we'll say year for the sake of argument?
So just
Thank
to
you.
go along with what you said about the purpose and importance and the mission of DEI, maybe one thing that would help both the community and this council and then staff obviously would be to have objectives. That way we can determine whether we're trying to, we've met them or what else needs to be done in order to satisfy those objectives. So I know that that's broad, but I think one thing that I have been, that I struggle with is the idea of, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish? And do we have criteria by which we know if we've accomplished it?
I think that's a good point. It's a good point. I'm wondering how this overlaps with their strategic plan. And do we actually? Yeah, I think I just want to know more. I want to revisit the strategic plan. I know we haven't outlined tactics, but just figure out how they work together.
And going back to Pam and David, I think we need to go ahead and publish all of the things that we did, the work.
It's all out there.
Yeah, I know, we'll
Yeah.
actually make it an announcement that is there.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think we've ever done that. And then for me, deciding we're going to go internally, externally, because it's internally, it's better for staff to think of all those things, not city council.
Which is what we've done already, right? Is that we really have left to Dr. Peoples the implementation of the recruitment, hiring, retention portion of this.
Right.
Yes.
But as far as developing strategy and plan to leverage strengths, mission, vision for the DEI, the individuals that's participated in that process should create those vision and mission and purpose.
Well, I was kind of thinking about that too, like which comes first? Like, do we want to establish the council to help us set the mission, the purpose, the direction? Or do we need to set that as a council before we have a commission so they have like strong guidance going in?
I don't think the council is going to be able to give them a strong guidance, but I think before you start the council, if you're talking about internally, staff have already created their vision, missions and purpose and communication to the employees, and then they start talking about a council. They come in with the already knowing what that is.
Are you though, Emerson, the vision mission statement is one for the city, correct? Not just for staff working for the city?
Depends on if you go internally and externally. Internally could be completely different because you're trying to strengthen the workers, the employees that going to serve our city.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And we
I-
need both, right? I mean, we need,
eventually, when you go to, if you start talking about the community, it's a
Yeah.
different process.
because
So-
the DEI council or commission, because the council word is messing me up. 'Cause I keep wondering which council we're talking about. But that DEI group, the recommendation was to have it be both internal and external
Right.
people on it. And now that's a recommendation, doesn't mean that's what we have to do, but I was thinking of it jointly.
Yeah, and I think there can be, I guess I think of it like there could be subcommittees for the DEI council regarding internal versus external. In order, like, in other words, I think the DEI council should be all encompassing both internal and external. That's just my 2 cents. I mean, maybe later on we decide, hey, that's not working. We need to split it up, but I think you bring up a good point, Emerson. Like, I haven't thought about it like that, that there's might be a different purpose for internal versus external.
And, once, to me, like I mentioned earlier, the internal will be my most important factor to start. And then once you start doing the community part, then that DEI council have another set of priorities to make sure that the community priorities is not different from the internal, because that's what we're depending on, the internal employees to service our city and how they service. They're looking at a DEI strategy when they deliver services to our community.
Yeah, in my mind, that's the reverse order in terms of setting the vision, mission, purpose statement. That the overall statement should be set first as a community, then our employees can use that as their, general statement of values to figure out, let's be a little more specific about how that fits in terms of doing our job in this.
Well, it's really giving the employees the, not authority, but to set their own criteria, how we're going to do our work.
Sure, I don't disagree with that part of
Yeah,
it.
and then, but I'm just saying, if you're bringing in the community, say, I think they need to do this, I think they need to do that. They've lost empowerment.
That's not, so let me see if I can be a little clearer. If we're talking about an overall vision, mission, right? We're talking about a broad statement.
Not necessarily.
Well, for the community perspective,
community
yes,
perspective.
and I think that broad statement has to come first to be sure that whatever employees come up is consistent with that broad statement of value.
You can end up with 2 different statements.
I understand, but they have to be consistent value wise.
Well, I'm saying if you bring in the internal first, and when the external come in, here is the mission, vision, purpose for our internal staff. They've encompassed this, they have embraced it, and it's working. And then.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong
it's
with-
not that I don't understand what you want to do. I just disagree with it.
No, I'm just saying, I think the internal is, we set all the criteria, the steps, the motions for internal first. Then after they have a good concept and working well, then we move to external.
But you just used the we word after we set, but
I consider myself part of City Hall. And City Hall is part of the. employee.
so, but are we gonna, well, I won't go down that road. We'll get there. Anyone else over here? I'm gonna state my preference is different. I think we have a really good start on the internal, thanks to our leadership staff. And that continues to be something now that department directors are aware of, and it needs some structure. So it continues over time. I do think, though, we need to get to the point where we are whether it's through a DEI council, board, commission, whatever we want to call it, that we do have a partnership between what goes on in City Hall and what we're saying outside of City Hall, what the community is thinking about. Because, remember, this is our state, our new mission statement, vision statement. I'm so confused all the time about those two things, is really about us being a welcoming and inclusive community, which is more than how our employees serve the residents of our community. So and in terms of how to get it started and how to spend some of the money, I'd like to take a lesson from the PCEB, which struggled mightily to get up and running. And I think it's because we didn't provide, as a council, the kind of professional support that they needed in order to figure out what the structure was. How do you write the vision statement? How do you write a mission statement? I mean, my personal preference would be for us, and this may make some people mad, is to maybe rethink the PCEB and have a broader kind of equity commission in which the job of the PCEB is part of that job of the broader equity commission. And that equity commission gets real substantial support from Hicks Carter Hicks or somewhere else to get themselves up and running in a way that is meaningful for the rest of us to be able to buy into and support, and then really implement the kinds of things that they're talking about.
And I agree with that. If you want to broaden what the PCB was originally structured for, we can give them that and they can be working on it in their own little silo, I guess you can say.
Well, subcommittee kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but I do know empowerment with employees is very, very important. Yeah. You can constantly say, this is what we do, this is what we decided, so this is what you do. But when they have their input and it's accepted, then we roll with it. Even if sometimes we don't understand it completely, but it's their statement, they're willing to work with it, and, they will make changes as it grows.
Could I go in a different direction?
Before we go in a different direction, do you mind if I had let Dr. Peoples comment on what internally is that
Yeah,
too much of a
no.
distraction?
Well,
Actually, she doesn't.
she may
we'll
cover
give
what
her-
I asked.
We're going to give her some time to think about that. So why don't you go ahead and change the direction for a minute?
My
Since-
question was for Dr. Peoples,
Yes,
because I
ma'am.
wanted to learn a little bit more about the inclusion director that we will be sharing with the other municipalities and what their role is.
Absolutely. So you had perfect timing for that. Mr. Davis.
Welcome, Scott. Thanks for coming right on time.
Good evening. So this is a shared role that has actually been in place for the last, I don't know, decade plus, but it's been housed in other cities. So the previous person moved away, and so we had the opportunity to hire them and bring them on staff here at Webster. But they're available for anybody who has any sort of needs, be it mental, emotional, physical disabilities of any kind, that they can help them to be part of any of our recreation programs, talk with the parents, find out what the needs of the children are, if they're children, help provide them resources. For instance, we just went and borrowed a off-road wheelchair for a camper for this week. Something that they didn't have, and they're coming to day camp. So it would be something that could be a great use for them this week as they're running around through Blackburn Park. So
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that. She's also available for any type of construction projects, for building, ADA, law, things of that nature as well.
So with this last grant that we've already discussed, the EV charging grant, the ADA inclusion coordinator was able to assist us as we looked at making each of the charging stations ADA accessible. The language that she contributed in the review is incredibly helpful.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Sure, I'll make one more, Mayor.
Please, Emerson. Because you
I-
know I'm going to too.
No, I do agree with your statement about broadening the PCEB.
Mhm.
I think we made their job we want them to do too confining. You know, you gotta find a minister, we gotta find a doctor. And there's a lot of community members that would like to work on that, but they don't fit into the criteria that we set. So I would definitely be in favor of re-looking at the PCEB and redefining their purpose.
I agree. I mean, I'm happy to, with that recommendation to broaden that, to make it internal and external, like we would need to add staff to that, more staff to that as well, I would think. I like the idea of having a unified vision for internal and external, and I know they have differences too, but having one kind of driving shared vision, I think would be good and help prevent confusion.
Karen, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I do like what Emily was just saying. I mean, but one of the things that just kind of rung with me really was what David mentioned earlier about the importance of having objectives. Because, you know, just like we ended up with the police community engagement boards, you know, we just sit people in a room and say, now do something, you know, and then it takes that long for them to figure out what that's going to be. So I think that that's important to have to actually have objectives. And then the other is, I think that to not make people feel boxed in, because, you know, I think one of the things I heard Marie say, you know, when I a little earlier is about, you know, you have a lot of people that are totally embracive of the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion. And then you have a lot of people that thinks that it's just the current buzzword. And so it's I think we just need to be careful in how we structure it, have some objectives there, and you know, just give people some direction and something to work with. I also think that it's really important to in the engagement and the use of the individual, I'm sorry, I forgot the title that Scott was just talking about.
Inclusion
Inclusion.
coordinator.
The inclusion coordinator, because I mean, generally when you say DEI, people immediately jump to race.
Right.
You know, and I think it's important that we communicate that inclusion is broader than race.
Thank you. So my one question I have for those of you who have talked about objectives, who, or just the council in general, who do we think, who's going to set these objectives?
Well, in normal DEI work, you would have a facilitator. It might be Carter Hicks, I guess. And then Carter Hicks will spend time with the council to determine in what direction that we would like to see it done, and she will share it with us.
Has some of that already been done?
That's so good. So we're a step ahead of the game.
I think that's where I'm struggling, is like, what's our foundation that we've already done, and like, what's the next step that we need to do?
And a step I mean, you know, it was, I don't, how long ago did we do that?
18 months.
18 months ago. So, you know, it's stale, you know, because we gained employees, lost employees. And so there needs to be a
Can't do it
refresh.
every year.
I cannot say it's
You say you
stale.
can't do it every year?
I mean,
The full-blown
full-blown
study that
thing.
we did. I mean,
you could have refreshed a little bit, I guess.
Well,
I don't know.
I think we just need to revisit it and see what applies.
Yeah.
Pretty
revisit,
simple.
but I'm saying from this, it needs to be continuous. We can't put another
Yeah.
18-month gap into that. We have to make sure we invest in our employees to make sure they stay on top. When we have a new employee, DEI training is something they should go through to make sure they're up to date with everybody else.
I would argue we have not had an 18-month gap. There's been a lot.
Well, I'm just repeating what somebody said.
No,
I,
it's been
18 months was when the recommendations were given to us.
Mhm.
Yeah, but there's been a lot of activity since then.
Yep.
Yeah.
There have been things already accomplished.
So we, you know, Dr. Peter shared some of the things that have been created and done. So we kind of need to see what on our checklist, what has been done and where we're at.
I sort of look at this as in part our checklist, right? I mean, it's a general checklist. It's
Mhm.
not specific. And so, the foster inclusivity and equity in recruitment, hiring, and retention. I think we can put a check mark with a star that says it has to continue and be, a constant source of attention. But that really has moved along quite a bit. The other stuff on there, and let's be realistic. The one thing on that list that could be left entirely to staff is the one thing that's actually gotten done. The stuff that requires us to do this work hasn't been done yet. And so this is part of why this is back again, so that we can figure out what it is as a council that we want to do. So we're not waiting another period of months before we just, we need to come to some decision about what comes next, even if that decision is, hey, let's form a subcommittee. Because we're only got one right now. We got rid of the boards and commissions, that finished work that says, let's go look at what some other the cities are doing in terms of their councils. What are they doing with the inclusion of their staff in these things? So that at least, we have some work being done. If there's something, Emerson, you'd like to suggest that we do in terms of the kind of internal portion of this, I'm really open to hearing that as well. Because I agree with you that that's absolutely critical, but of course, that's the part we have kind of left to staff. So I'm not sure what our role is in that.
Be more than happy to. But, we must be prepared. Resources will probably be needed as well.
Well, that's the other thing is that we have the $50,000 that we have committed to this because we think it's important, and that's obviously an initial investment. But yeah, they need to get us off to a strong start. So does anybody have any other specific things? I'm going to suggest that we just go ahead and go the subcommittee route right now with a date certain that the subcommittee comes back to us, so that we don't let this linger for very long. And I'm going to suggest that date certain be our first meeting in September. Is that first of all, is there anybody willing to be on the subcommittee?
I'm willing.
I knew you would be.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly willing. Maybe it'll be a subcommittee of two. Anybody else care to join us?
There's I just Googling, trying to find out, there's a lot of resources out there already for municipalities. What would be the objective of the subcommittee?
I think to come back with some more specific ideas about what would a board or commission look like? What are the internal things that we're asking to be implemented for staff? To maybe come up with at least a little bit some of those objectives that we're talking about.
Well, I guess maybe I think it would be helpful maybe to narrow the focus a little bit, because this is a very broad topic that reaches into almost every facet, as it should. But I wonder if, you can't really clean up someone else's house when your house is dirty, kind of thing. So maybe it's best, going back to Emerson's initial comment, between the internal and external, we concentrate first on being the leader within the community of DEI. And then once we establish internally that we have a good DEI program, protocols, a pragmatic approach, then we can start branching out to looking at other things, including, housing, playgrounds, everything like that DEI can touch. Because my concern is this can easily get swallowed. Like
I agree, it could
Yeah.
easily get swallowed, and which is in some ways why I think the board or commission is a good idea,
Yeah.
in that they then operate the way every other board and commission does, and goes through some of these things that we make assignments to them, but they also will come back to us and say, just like traffic advisory, these are, some of the things that we see. I guess I want to go back to this. The discussion suggests we are lacking something significant internally right now in our DEI program. And I'm going to ask Dr. Peoples, you don't have to do it tonight. If you want to think about that and come back to us, what is it that we are missing internally, in your opinion, that we should be focused on?
So thank you, Mayor, and I'm happy to do that. And I will reserve my answer for later. So we have our directors meeting tomorrow, and I would really like to hear from the directors, what they think are missing. I also want to hear about capacity. DEI is so incredibly important, but it's time consuming, as it should be. And I think that as we move forward with meaningful and purposeful steps, we also have to have the time to invest and to carve that out so that staff can. So I would like to have an opportunity to speak with directors and maybe bring back some suggestions.
This kind of goes back to the objectives part. It's like, what is the objective? Is the objective to create a more diverse workforce, regardless of what, inclusive diversity, whatever that, we decide what that means. But I think that's really where I'm hung up on, is like, what's our objective? Like, obviously, this sounds wonderful, but I don't know exactly what we're trying to obtain or to attain to.
Well, why don't we put this discussion on hold? Let Dr. Peoples have an opportunity to think through the internal part of this. Our next work session is on tactics created in response to the strategic plan. And part of what people were supposed to think about was inclusiveness, equity in that. And so we may get a clear sense of what it is we want to layer with that strategic plan after we've done that discussion.
Can we assign everyone to come back with an objective they want to see the city accomplish?
I don't have.
I think that makes, because then at least we got an idea of what the 7 of us are thinking. And whether we can distill that down into a framework that can be applied throughout the internal structure of the city.
So you want a set of, oh, sorry, Emerson, please go ahead.
You say the city, you mean internal or external?
I think how I guess I'm looking at this right now, Emerson, is I'm thinking internally. So like, say your objective, I'm not saying this is my objective, but you want to increase the diversity of applicants to the city by 50%. So like, that's just, what is your objective? What is it that you think is would help move the needle in regards to DEI internally at the city?
Yeah, I agree. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
I feel like
Please
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
support what you said in that we've got the framework of a strategic plan pretty much in place. And if we go outside of that framework right now to figure out other objectives, I think the easier thing is to see where DEI plugs in to the strategic plan. It's already a tenet of the strategic
Right.
plan.
Mhm.
So how does it integrate into the rest of the goals?
How about, David, if you will remember when at the end of the strategic plan, let's revisit that.
Yeah.
Because we might then be in a position where
make a
everyone
decision, yeah.
can really agree on doing something like that.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, and I will make a note and try to remember myself.
And, just put another idea out there. Dr. Peoples gonna go back to her directors to find out what they feel. There's nothing wrong with the council sitting in and having a discussion with those directors.
Yeah.
We're working with them. Hopefully they'll still be open and honest to say what they actually need.
I just worry about their time because if the 7 of us are in that director's meeting, it's gonna go way over.
I'm just going to give you fair warning. It's their opportunity to talk and you're going to get what you get. So
Well,
it's
that
a-
I would take.
It's
Yeah.
a,
I just don't want
it's
to
a
put more on their
rambunctious
plate.
group. As I listened to this discussion, Chris Hines, our HR manager, she's, as I shared, been putting together some of the DEI information and trainings, and she's been attending some trainings as well. And she always writes a nice summary and shares it with others about what she got. And the one key word that I keep honing in on, it's not so much DEI, not to diminish it, but the key word that seems to be the focus is belonging. And how do we have all of our staff feel like they belong? And how does every community member feel like they belong in the community? Do we all have a place?
I like that. Very good.
I think that's an excellent place to leave this conversation for right now. I'm just gonna say did everyone have a chance to read Carrie Coyne's details about the Leave the Leaves in the fall? Does anyone feel it's necessary for us to have a council discussion of this, or do we feel pretty good that this just is an extension of NOMO?
Well, I did have one question on it because he had, I think one part it said my flower beds. And the other portion looked like it was talking about my lawn. So is it leaving the leaves in the flower beds or leaving the leaves on the lawn?
It's what works for you and your lawn and your home.
No, leaves on my lawn don't work for me, but.
Then don't leave them there.
No.
No,
Leave them in your
it's
flower
meant-
beds as mulch. Yeah.
Flower beds, mulch is fine.
Yeah, it's meant to be open so that if people want to leave them on their lawn, they go for that. If
Just
they,
going through reading it, I got the idea was leaves on the.
Just in the yard.
Just in the yard,
It's
but
meant
there
to be
was
like
one
a
section
spectrum.
that said flower bed.
yeah.
I'm okay with that, so.
Okay, so that's a note for our messaging on that particular thing. But is there anyone objecting to us letting green space continue with this?
No objection.
Just as long as the message is
Clear.
clear and, does it really affect the city? I mean, I'm thinking about no cut, was it no cut
No
May,
mowing.
no mowing May? I think we had a lot of comments on no mowing May because the city property didn't look trimmed and neat, so it's how far we're gonna go with no leaves.
This doesn't
It's
really
the
change
first
anything for the
year.
city.
It's
for
the,
leaves.
it's the first year, it's like, of course, there's gonna be complaints, right? Like,
Yeah.
people, I mean, we're changing a mindset, like, we're saying environment's important,
Okay, I think that's good. I think we'll leave it there. We do not have any appointments to boards and commissions to make, although we have some of the library board members here. Welcome. Glad to have you all here for our item of business in a few minutes. We'll take just, a couple minute break here and try and get started just shortly after 7:30 if we could. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council for June 20th, 2023. We welcome questions, ideas, and comments from persons in attendance. Members of the audience may, however, comment only when recognized by the mayor. We ask that those comments be limited to 3 minutes in order to complete the agenda within a reasonable time. Comments concerning items not on the agenda should be made during remarks of visitors. If you're here and you'd like to make a remark of visitors, here's the card. There's some right over there on the table. Please do fill them out and you can hand them in at the end of the dais there, and that's where we will collect them and you will be recognized. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a comment, you'll use the raise your hand function when we get to that portion of the meeting agenda. We will start with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson is absent. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right, we are going to start off with, I'm glad to say a recognition. It's sort of bittersweet because Judge James Whitney is leaving us. The state of Missouri is basically forcing him out. Sorry about that, Judge. But we do have a few things for you, including a proclamation and, a few little gifts along the way because we are very grateful for your service. So I will, if you don't mind, read the proclamation, come down, hand it over, and hand over some gifts to you. That work? All right. Whereas Municipal Judge James W. Whitney Jr. was appointed as Webster Groves Municipal Judge on February 4th, 1997, bringing with him a vast amount of legal experience, including his experience as a trial attorney. And whereas Judge Whitney has stated that he has enjoyed working with the court clerks, prosecutors, and police officers, as he could not have performed his duties as judge without their hard work. In addition, the court had significant challenges to tackle together, including the pandemic, where the court was run with virtual dockets. And whereas Judge Whitney has always been known to run a fair and respectful court, always taking into consideration that for some, coming to court may be the only interaction they have with the city of Webster Groves. He always welcomed those parents who had brought their children to court, and the court experience was always respectful. Providing a fair process for all was always his top priority, with a touch of humor. And whereas the city thanks Judge Whitney for his dedicated service and for making the Webster Groves court system run so professionally for the last 26 years. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, on behalf of the entire council, wish to thank and honor Municipal Judge James W. Whitney Jr. for his many years of service to our city, and do hereby proclaim Friday, June 23rd as Municipal Judge Jim Whitney Day in the City of Webster Groves.
There goes the neighborhood.
Billy, thank you very much. You know,
We appreciate this.
absolutely. I think maybe so. I want to take some pictures.
Yeah, I figured the last
Yeah.
time, there we go.
We haven't.
And we'll let the council join us. Come on.
Thank you, Bob.
Set this aside. Your first gift is to, you know, you decide, I hope you have a man cave or somewhere that you go. The garage. We have identified its place.
Jim, they made that big enough for you to read.
So there's no way. You're reverend.
Privilege.
Well, I think thank you as well, you know.
The only.
She's got you back. Well, I hope you all will come in for just a few minutes into the conference room, and we're gonna let Judge Whitney cut the cake, unless you have a cutting cake. So this is my sister now. Let's do it. All right, so everyone is invited. Oh, what do you guys, why are you discussing whether they are or not? Oh, yeah. All right, why don't we call this meeting to order, back to order? Our two star players, I believe, are coming back in here. I forgot we need to, you're not next, you're next, Madison. Sorry about that. All right. Our next order of business is to administer the oath of office to our new municipal judge, James Larrett, and the honor of this oath of office administering will go to our outgoing judge, James Whitney Jr.
All right, come on up, Jim. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James C. Larrett. I, James C. Larrett. Do solemnly swear. Solemnly swear. That I am a resident of the city of Webster Groves. And I am a resident of the city of Webster Groves. And am qualified to serve as municipal judge for this city. And qualified to serve as municipal judge for this city. And any decision I render, while a judge, will be in compliance with the law. And made with impartiality and justice. Never on the basis of favoritism. Nor to serve any private or selfish purpose. That I will, as municipal judge, abide by the ordinances and charter of the city of Webster. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Welcome. Thank you for passing along that. Thank you. Oh, good. Thank you very much. Okay, fair enough.
Nice.
Thank you very much. I can sort of do this.
There we go. All right.
Take home some
We
cake.
have paramedics here just in case.
So you both are welcome to stay, but I don't think anyone would hold it against you if you decided to go on your way, except for Katie, if you go and don't take cake with you. So please stop and get some cake. Thank you very much, and we appreciate it.
Both of us will be back here.
Yes, exactly. All right. We now have on our agenda the presentation of the annual library budget report. Madison Morris, who is the director of the Webster Groves Public Library, is with us to bring us her first report. I will say that I have gotten to know Madison a little bit, and our library is in very good hands. And so I hope you'll all listen closely and welcome her to our community. Madison, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Or I guess I should say thank you, Mayor. Sorry.
That's
I already
okay.
got it wrong.
That's okay. But you're gonna have to talk a little louder than that.
Okay, so yes, as the mayor said, my name is Madison Morris. I'm the new director of the Webster Groves Public Library. I'm very happy to be here. I have been the director for about 4 months now. I started in February. And this is my first budget, so I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. First, before that, I did just want to plug the library for a second and let you guys know that our summer reading program is in full swing. So if you want to participate, it is for adults as well, but tell your friends, tell your family, and we would love for you to participate. I don't have enough for everyone, but I did bring some bingo flyers that is for the summer reading program to pass around, as well as a few of our events calendars for July that has all of our programs that we have going on. So couldn't come just talk about the budget, had to, mention a few things
See?
going on at the library
I
as well.
said they were in good hands at the library, so.
Okay, now I will actually talk about the budget. So my budget is based off of our received revenue for 2022 and 2023. One thing to note is that it does not currently include state aid. There were many reasons for not including our normally allotted state aid in this particular budget. The first was when I started making this budget, all of state funding for libraries had been taken out of the Missouri state budget. It has luckily been added back in, which I'm very happy about. But it also now depends on us complying with a Secretary of State rule. We do plan to comply with this rule, but that doesn't actually go into effect until July 31st. That's when all of our paperwork has to be submitted. So including state aid in the budget just seemed a little risky at this point, which is why I did not include it. And if we do get it, which we most likely will at this point, we will, there's a 99% chance that we will continue getting our state funding. It will be a happy addition to our budget. A few other.
Go on, Madison.
Yeah.
Jenny, could you just make the numbers a little bigger for us?
Madison, could you explain what the impact would be if the state did not give you the state funding?
Sure. So we get, it's actually gone up a bit, but it's about 25,000 to 30,000, actually going up to about $40,000 this year in state aid, which is just general funding that we add to our budget that helps us do different things within the library. It helps us staff the library. It helps us buy materials for the library. Basically, it just has an impact on our day-to-day. It's, if you're looking at our numbers, it's not a huge portion of our budget, but it is still a substantial number, and we would notice if it's gone. The other thing to note, without state aid, that doesn't just include that yearly sum. That would include any state grants that we might apply for. That's where it ends up being really noticeable. So, you know, if the library needs to replace all of our 20 computers, we can usually get a grant for that instead of that coming out of the yearly budget, because that's going to be a substantial number. So it doesn't just include the general funding, it includes all of the grants as well as the internet stipend that we get through the state grants as well.
Thank you very much.
Any other
Please go.
questions about state aid? Okay. So in this budget, I don't know how closely everyone has looked at it, but like I said, it is based off of revenue that we received for 2022 and 2023. There are a few areas that the budget is higher than it was last year. One area is in our equipment budget. That's actually $13,000 more than it was last year because we have a big server upgrade project that is happening this year. Our server will no longer be supported in October, so we need to get that upgraded before that happens. A few other areas that have gone up are our interlibrary loan, which is when we get materials that maybe we don't have in our library, we can get them from all over the state. So that's interlibrary loan. That has gone up a little bit this year. Postage has gone up. That mainly has gone up because we do a lot of passports. So when doing a lot of passports, you have to mail a lot of passports out. So our postage budget has just kind of gone through the roof. A few other areas are adult special events. I added more money to that line item because we are planning on doing more adult programs this coming year. That's something that I'm pretty passionate about, is doing all kinds of library and community programs. So adding more money to that line item made sense. And then a few other areas would be adult and juvenile books. We did add about 10% increase there. The thing is, you don't actually see that. It doesn't seem like we actually added an increase to our books, adult and books, juvenile and YA line items, because in previous years, that was intermixed with what we were doing with e-resources. So any of our ebooks, e-audiobooks, or we also have Canopy, which is a kind of a documentary streaming service. All of that was taken out of those two line items. And for this new budget, I actually took those items and made them their own line. So you can see there's the ebooks, and e-audiobooks has its own line item now, which is a pretty substantial line item. Those have been more and more popular as years have gone by, and we have lots of people using them. So that's the biggest difference in those line items, is I took them out so that you can actually see what's going towards physical material and what's going towards our e-resources. Yeah, I feel like that pretty much touches on the big items. Obviously, our biggest item is always going to be our staff. You can't have a library if you don't have staff members there. So that's what we spend the most money on. And then the next would be the materials that we actually stock in the library.
Great. Any questions for Madison?
That's for me.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Am I correct? We don't approve this budget. She just simply presents.
Yes.
And we thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for having me.
And please share how well all this went with the library board tomorrow night.
Thank you, Madison.
All right. And you are free to stay, or you're free to go as well. We're going to move to remarks of the community and visitors. And we first have Mr. Dave Buck, 124 South Elm.
It's great. You talked about DEI. This is what I want to comment on tonight. I grew up in Kansas, which is the red state. My parents were both diehard Republicans. They were also lifelong Episcopalians or Christians. In 1975, when I was a senior in college, my younger sister, Katie, who's 5 years younger than I was a junior in high school, and Katie came out as a gay lesbian woman. Katie was called abnormal. She was called unnatural. She was called sick. She was called a sin against God. This is in 1975, but she was a profile in courage. She hung in there. And for me, 5 years older, she changed my view of the world, and she changed me forever. That's personal story one. Second personal story is that, Marie, you know Barb, but Laura, you really know Barb. Barb lives DEI without saying it. I have never met anybody that lives her life based on honesty, kindness, acceptance, empathy, and inclusion. David, she doesn't have any goals every day. She has values, and she lives her values every single day at work and in life. And I could tell you a bunch of stories, but she works in the used brick business downtown. She's the only woman, she's the only white Caucasian in that business. It's all Black, and it's a tough crowd because these are all, some of our ex-cons tearing bricks down and stuff like that. Laura, you asked about what could City Hall or City Council do in this regard. And I appreciate statements and stuff, but ultimately words are cheap. The only thing that matters are our actions. And like Katie, when she came out, when homosexuality was the moral issue of today, today, transgender is the moral issue of today. In Jeff City, in states all around the world, it's being anti-trans bills, right? Anti-gay, anti-trans, anti. And what I would love to see is this, if you want, it's in your power to come forward and make a statement. You know, our town, I've lived here 23 years. It leans a little conservative, it leans traditional, it leans conventional, it leans more sort of the status quo, it leans slow to change or resistance to change. It doesn't really lean progressive or innovative as much. But the point is that this is an issue. I have a really good transgender friend who's now a sophomore at Loyola University in New Orleans. Yeah, I'm going to finish. Banjo.
Please, very quickly, Dave.
Yeah. This individual was born Sonia Bergfeld. And he knows that I've already shared with the school district. I'm sharing here. He's now Banjo Bergfeld. He's the sweetest kid. He's a musical prodigy. And it's like, it just doesn't matter what his gender identity is. He's a human being and he ought to be treated as such. And all I'm saying is that I think the city has an opportunity to come out and make a statement about transgender and about supporting them, because the state is off the rocker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Dave, I would say the last 3 elections prove that we might lean a little bit more to the left than we do the right in this city.
All right. And that's a conversation you can have anytime. Our next speaker's card is from Janet Noble.
Wait a long time. You want to? That's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the issue of working at home. So I live in a intimate area where I live in Northwest Webster, and the adult daughter of a neighbor is working out of the garage. She doesn't live there normally. So 3 weeks ago, she started painting outside and she was wearing a gas mask. And I was out watering in my yard. And I couldn't stay out there because of the smell. So I started thinking about the issue that we now allow people to work out of their homes. I really wonder if these circumstances were what the council passed when they allowed people to work out of their homes. If it's just people who live in the house, or can I hire a nephew that's a mechanic and work out of my garage? Can I do that? So I don't know if this is the time and place for me to ask these questions, but I'd like to get some answers and some more details. Is it was this made an ordinance that people can work out of their homes, or is it just allowed, or?
So Janet, why don't I call you tomorrow and you and I can talk about this? Because the other part about this is not just our city ordinances that are involved. The state of Missouri
Okay,
lifted a whole bunch of our authority to make regulations about working from home in the legislative session a year ago. So it's both state and local. And so I'll give you a call and we can talk about it.
okay. I've got a lot of things here on this statement that you'll see, but I kind of wanted to get everybody's opinion on it on the council, because some of us may have been more exposed than other people to this. And I didn't know if the council had really discussed it in great detail. So, because it's interfering with me to work in my backyard. So that's the main point. And that I have no privacy in my yard now, that I used to have somewhat privacy, but I don't have that anymore. So, okay, thank you.
It may be Thursday because I may need tomorrow to make sure I am fully informed of what but I'll call you in the next couple of days.
Okay. And for the most part, I don't have any problem with this working there, as long as the spray doesn't come in my yard.
Right.
That's really bothers me. And I won't be available tomorrow anyway. I'm going
Oh.
to the opera.
Oh, good.
to see Taco. So.
How about
it's-
this? Why don't you call me at your convenience? Because you have my cell phone number, I believe.
I can get it.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
sure. All right. Is there anyone online? If you're online and you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function. I do not see anyone, so I think we will go ahead. Is there any new business from anyone here on the dais? All right, we will proceed then to unfinished business. Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9227, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9227 and its subsequent adoption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill 9227, third and final reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to WG Restaurant Investors LLC to allow a restaurant, no drive-through use on an approximately 0.42 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 101 West Lockwood Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto, and repealing ordinance 9206.
Is there any discussion? Right, let's have the vote then, please.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. Councilmember Alexander, could you call for the third reading of bill number 9228, please?
Yes, I would like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9228 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9228, third and final reading. An ordinance defining the pay grades of the classified and unclassified service of the city of Webster Groves, fixing the compensation for employees in said classifications, and repealing ordinance 9220.
Is there any discussion? Right, let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, we will move on to new business. Councilmember Franklin, could you call for the first and second reading of bill number 9229, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9229.
Second. Bill 9229, first reading. An ordinance permitting the subdivision of certain property at 818 Holland Avenue and 826 Holland Avenue.
Is there discussion?
No, but I do need to recuse myself from any.
Will you use your microphone just to say that?
I need to recuse myself from any discussion or voting for this issue because it involves my property.
All right, thank you. Any additional discussion, questions? Let's have the second reading, please.
Bill 9229, second reading. An ordinance permitting the subdivision of certain property at 818 Holland Avenue and 826 Holland Avenue.
All right, Councilmember Bliss, could you call for the first and second reading of bill number 9230, please?
Yes, I'd not like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9230.
Do I have a second?
Bill 9230, first reading. An ordinance amending chapter 60, the traffic code by repealing Article 4, section 60.160, speed regulation generally, and amending Article 16, section 60.940, Schedule A, quote, maximum speed for designated streets, unquote.
Is there any discussion? I just want to say for the record, we're not asking for it to be the wild, wild west here. This is something we need to do to be in accordance with state law. Is that correct? Or actually Supreme Court
Yeah.
decisions? Okay. All right. Second reading then, please.
Bill 9230, second reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 60, the Traffic Code, by repealing Article 4, Section 60.160, speed regulation generally, and amending Article 16, Section 60.940, Schedule A, quote, maximum speed for designated streets, unquote.
Councilmember Smith, could you call for the adoption of resolution 2023-23?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call reading of resolution 2023-23 and subsequent adoption.
Second.
Resolution 2023-23, adoption of the budget for fiscal year 2024.
All right, Sarah Richardson was unable to be with us tonight, and so she has sent a statement she would like for me to read. Fellow council members, Mayor Arnold, Dr. Peoples, city staff, and community members, I am sorry I am unable to be in our meeting this evening, but wish to make my opinion on the proposed city budget for 2024 known. I am enthusiastically voting in favor of this budget. I have appreciated the time, energy, care poured into this budget by Dr. Peoples, Mr. Peterson, and all department directors. I also appreciate the time given to answering the many questions asked by this council, as well as the thoughtful suggestions of my colleagues. I'm eager to see the fruits of this labor in the form of new initiatives and technological and structural improvements. Thank you to everyone for their hard work. My vote is yes. For those of you out there, technically it won't be a vote, but it is a registered support for this budget. So thank you to Councilmember Richardson. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything about the budget?
Not necessarily about the budget, but the process that we went through. It was thorough, informative, made sure we had all of the information we needed to make some good decisions. I think this might be my fourth budget. And last year was good, but this year is even better. So I want to thank Dr. Peoples and her administration staff for putting something together and making the process much easier.
A great process, and I would also encourage citizens, residents to look at the narrative online. It really does help explain a lot about what goes on in the city and breaks it down in terms that are, even though they're numerous and it's very detailed, it's understandable. And so that's a great resource that we all have, but thanks for all the work on it. And I think Councilmember Richardson said it very well.
Yep.
Other comments? I'll just make one final comment. I wanted to really highlight the participation of our department directors who answered a lot of questions from us, both in these meetings and outside of these meetings. And over the last couple of years, obviously in accordance with Dr. Peoples and Mr. Peterson, have worked really hard to put us in a position that we are much better off financially going forward than we had been. So to those directors, I'm very grateful, also to Dr. Peoples and Mr. Peterson. And I really appreciate the work of my colleagues. You know, it's one thing to be provided with a whole bunch of new information or additional information. It's another thing for you all to actually dig in and look at the details and really weigh the alternatives. And we had, I think, the best discussions about budget this year than we've had since I've been on the council, and that I'm grateful to you all for that. Having said all that, I think we are ready to vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd, could you call for the approval of the consent? Or actually, does anyone want to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Not necessarily remove, but could we talk about one of the items?
Certainly.
I saw the letter about the windows. Can we talk a little bit about the windows and what the plan is there?
Yes, thank you. And I can reference an email. So the response, I don't believe made it into your packets, but Mara, Planning Director, as well as Todd, Public Works Director, responded to that. The most important piece to me is that we certainly were not ignoring our own rules or what we make homeowners do. So I can share that response and it will be in your council packet next time. I believe both Mara and Todd are on. If you want to hear, I apologize, if you want to hear any specifics in terms of the response.
Sure, and curious, what will the material of the windows be, I guess? Like, will they be vinyl or will they be wood?
Sure, Mr. Ray, considering you reviewed all of the bids, would you please chime in?
Yes, they will be vinyl windows. I've reviewed, we had 5 bids and I reviewed them all, and they're all quality windows. And we will have energy efficient windows when they get installed at the City Hall building.
And I'm assuming because it was the bid selected that we're not concerned about what the appearance will be. We're confident that it will be a good fit for the building.
Yes, the grid patterns will be identical to what we have now. They'll just be thinner than the wood panels that we have on the windows now.
What color is the vinyl?
White.
On both sides, interior and exterior.
Yes, except in the council chambers, they will appear the wood grain finish.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'll read just a piece of the response because I appreciate the question regarding it. So the only window replacements that go before ARB are window replacements that don't match the design, that do not match the design of the existing window. And that would relate only to the pattern of the grills. There is not a requirement for wood windows to be replaced with wood windows. Even in a historic district, they're allowed to be replaced with vinyl windows. So as Mr. Ray shared, the likeness on both the inside and outside will look the same and keep the character of the building.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else for discussion of the consent agenda? All right,
I need a second for that, Emily.
Second.
all right.
I never made a motion.
Oh, I
No,
thought
I was gonna ask her for the motion, but would you go ahead and make that
Yeah.
motion?
Yes, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right. Let's go ahead and have the vote.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
I have forgotten whether we need a closed session or not.
Very brief.
Very brief
Yes,
one.
under
Okay.
Subsection 1.
Okay, so we have no appointments to boards and commissions this evening. Councilmember Bliss, could you make that motion, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session pursuant to attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens, close parens.
Second.
Yes. That's Janet's notes.
Can I be a second? I'll be a second if I can be a second. I don't know what happened to everybody here.
Oh,
Usually we're all saying.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Next
I am
meeting's
gonna
on a
keep it to
Wednesday.
one call. All right, thank you all for joining us this evening.